Okay, once again, slight equipment malfunction, so back up a little bit. I'm going to turn over to make till you see the heavy print that says stormwater discharges and construction site runoff. They've been asking some questions about this on the other state tests. This program, if you see the term, you can highlight this under, if you see the term phase 2, that is the EPA designation for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. There are laws they created, but what we want to pay attention to, right under that, it says this covers construction sites that disturb 1 acre, but less than 5 acres. So the deal about stormwater discharge, it applies to a construction site that disturbs 1 acre, but less than 5, but at least 1 acre. A water permit on that same page, just in case, highlight this. Water permits come through LPDES. Highlight that. It's on the same page under the Water Permits Division. Now, look at the next page over, hazardous and non-hazardous wastes. You have a list, and they've asked which of the following would be a hazardous waste, which of the following is not a hazardous waste. If you look, you have both of your lists there. Once again, don't have to memorize them, just highlight them and know where to come to pick out which is hazardous and which is non-hazardous. Now, this has cropped up here recently. You could very well see it. Flip the page. It says remodeling or renovating a home with lead-based paint. Under required notification, I want you to highlight, the EPA says you have to give a pamphlet to the homeowner before you begin work that's entitled Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. But here's what I'm looking for. If you are renovating a house that was built before 1978, that's what I'm looking for. Any house that was built before 1978, I have to, before I work on it, I have to hand them this EPA pamphlet. Also, the penalties on the next page, failure to comply with it, $25,000. That's your penalty for not complying with the lead regulations. Make sure you have that highlighted. And we've got a bunch of forms here that we don't really need. I'm going to go all the way to chapter 13 in my book, which is Working with Subcontractors. Nothing about this necessarily, but there are questions about that have come up on the other exams. Who, if you finished your job, who is the person you're going to have the last contact with on the job? That would be the superintendent. Remember, we talked about him. You're going to go to the superintendent and tell him, hey, I finished my work. But on the other hand, if you don't have the superintendent as a choice, but if you have the inspector as a choice, only if the superintendent's not a choice, you would mark inspector, because he would be the last person to come look at your work. But kind of throw that to the side, but just remember you're going to check out and in on the job with the superintendent. Now go all the way to, this is Office Administration, Chapter 14 in my book, Financial Management. Several things here we're going to have to know, not necessarily know, but highlight. I want you to look under Find Balance Sheet. Highlight assets equal liabilities plus owner's equity. That will be the answer to a question. Highlight that. Now, also highlight the definition of liabilities on that same page, which is something you owe. Now, what you need to know is right below that, you see long-term, the difference between an ordinary liability and a long-term liability is the time frame of 1 year. Anything under a year under is a short term. Anything a year over is a long term. So, for instance, if I finance a truck for 60 months, that becomes a long-term liability. Now, flip over till you come to income statement. Highlight that first sentence. The income statement is sometimes called the profit and loss statement. Highlight that. Right up under that, highlight revenues minus expenses equals net profit. Highlight that. Flip over a page or so, find liquidity ratio. Under that, I want you to highlight current assets divided by current liabilities equals liquidity or current ratio. Highlight that. Right below that, quick ratio, highlight current assets minus inventory divided by current liabilities equal quick ratio. Remember, you don't have to memorize these. You just have to be able to find them in your book and match what you've highlighted to their answer. Flip over once again, top of the page. Revenue divided by days in the business year equals sales per day. Highlight that. Current receivables divided by sales per day equals average collection period. Those are kind of maybe possibilities for questions, but highlight them anyway. Debt ratio is a lot better possibility. Total debt divided by total assets equal debt ratio. Highlight that one. The next one, definitely highlight net income divided by revenues equals profit margin. Okay? Now, that same page, you have cash method and accrual method. These are your two types of accounting. The difference between them is cash method, you only record income when you're paid. The accrual method, you write income that's owed to you. In other words, you put it on your books even though you haven't been paid for it yet. In other words, you finish doing your rough end. If I'm using the accrual method of accounting, when I finish the rough end on May the 10th, I would put that in my books as, okay, I've finished that and it's owed to me. The cash method, I wouldn't put down that as an asset or an owed money to me until I actually got the check. You need to know the difference between those two, so have them highlighted. Flip over percentage of Social Security and Medicare. You'll see the two: Social Security tax, 6.2%. Under that, Medicare tax, 1.45%. Now, that is deducted from the employees, the 6.2% and the 1.45%, but the employer matches it. Okay? So all you're deducting out of his check is half of what's paid in. Okay, go to Chapter 15, Tax Basics. There's no such thing as basic tax. There's no such thing as tax being basically anything. But highlight employee identification number. It's an EIN. Every time you start a business, you go online or you call the Internal Revenue Service and you get an EIN number. That identifies you to them. That's your employee identification number. Okay, go flip a page here. Federal unemployment tax. Look here, and I want you to highlight this. Most employers, at the bottom of the page, most employers withhold except FUTA, F-U-T-A. FUTA is federal unemployment tax. We don't withhold that, but the employer pays it. Now, you have to keep all records of employment taxes for at least 4 years. Have that highlighted. Once again, if you flip over withholding rate, you'll see it down there under Social Security and Medicare. Withholding rate 6.2% and then 1.5%. That's what you take out of the employee's pay. Then you match that. Excuse me. Form W-2. We've already talked about this form, but you have to have it. Highlight this. It has to be furnished to all employees by January 31st. Mark that. Now, looking at the same page, see it says deposit schedule. There was a question, and this gives you this is for your tax deposits, your payroll tax deposits that you've withheld from your employee and that you're matching. The question was that your payroll period ended on Saturday, so the guys got their check on Saturday. When did you have to make your tax deposit? Well, one of your choices is Monday, which would be the next business day. Wrong. Look at this little box. It tells you when you have to make your tax deposits, when, with your payroll dates. And if your payday was on a Saturday, you were supposed to make that Friday. They don't give you no time. You're not going to say, hey, we'll just wait a minute or wait till next. Nope. You were supposed to make it the day before. You gave them their checks because their check was on Saturday, which is not a legal banking day. That's why. But highlight that. Remember that where that box is if they ask you a question like that. Next page, FUTA, we just talked about it, federal unemployment tax. You pay it. You don't withhold it, but you need to know the percentage. Right under there, calculating FUTA. FUTA tax rate is 6.2% of the first $7,000. You charge you pay 6.2% of his first $7,000 of payroll. Then flip the page. There's a big tax calendar box here. This has all of my dates, and I know you won't be able to see it, but I'm going to hold it up so you kind of know what it looks like. I know you can't read it, but that's what we're looking for. Highlight that box because that have all the dates when everything is due. So if they ask you, for instance, an employee requests a new W-2 form, blah, 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 when do you have to give it to him? By February 15th. This is the box you're going to go to, okay? Excuse me again. Okay, Louisiana state tax specifics. I don't know that they'll ask you any tax rates because they have it under here, under tax rates. Mississippi does. Nobody's ever told me Louisiana has, but go ahead and you can highlight these corporate tax rates here just in case they do. Now, this one they have asked, the last paragraph on this page where it says contractor fee and bond for non-residents. If you're an out-of-state contractor, which makes you a non-resident or an alien contractor, the state of Louisiana can make you put up a bond if your total contract price is, which is what's important, $3,000. He must register the contract and flip the page. He's got to register it with the Department of Revenue, and he's got to post a bond. Highlight that, remember that. That's only for out-of-state contractors. Louisiana withholding tables. No, we don't have to worry about that. There's a lot of stuff here. We're almost through, people. We're going to go check to make sure this is all withholding tables. Long time ago, they may have made you figure withholding on a paycheck, but that hadn't been in years. If you had to, they quit doing it because everybody's got different books and the tax rates change every year. So don't really worry about that. Let's go to chapter 16, mechanics lien laws. This is a very important chapter, actually for you personally in business, if you're going to start your own business, and also test-wise. Louisiana is the only state in the entire United States that is based on Napoleonic law, French. Everybody else is based on old Roman law or the Code of Hanover. You don't need to know that, but the point I'm getting to is Louisiana is based on French law, so our lien laws are different than other states. Now, the definition of a lien, highlight that first sentence there. Mechanic material lien is a cloud on the property. Basically what that cloud means is they can't sell that property or finance it or refinance it until this is cleared up. That's why we file a lien. Below the next same page, who's entitled to a lien, there's your list of people who are entitled to file a lien. Just keep the list highlighted, know where it is. Now, flip the page. Work eligible for a lien. I want you to highlight that paragraph. It's basically the answer to the question. But right below it, work not eligible for a lien. They've never really asked what is not eligible, but they have asked what is eligible. Now, I'm going to talk this and then we'll look at what to highlight. In Louisiana, what you're supposed to do, which very seldom ever gets done, but what you're supposed to do is when you sign a contract with a general contractor or an owner, you're supposed to go to the clerk of court's office and file what's called a notice of contract. And if you look, here's what all of it's supposed to contain, but it's just called a notice of contract. Okay? It's not a lien, but it is a notice of contract that I'm supposed to file. Now, once I've filed my notice of contract and I go through the job, at the end of the job I don't get paid, then I can file a lien. Theoretically, you were supposed to file the notice of contract, then you're able to file a lien. Once you file that lien, or before you file the lien, you're supposed to file something else, a notice of termination. Now remember, we went to Secretary of State, we filed a notice of contract. When the job's finished, I'm supposed to go to Secretary of State and file a notice of termination. Then I'm technically legal to file a lien. Okay. Once I file my lien, which we're going to get into the time periods on it, but once I file my lien, in Louisiana I have to do what is called file suit to enforce the lien. That has to be done within 1 year of filing of the lien. Now, a lot of this is pertaining to the test questions, but also this little thing I just got through talking about is also for your benefit. Now, let's go back. Notice of contract, highlight that because we're going to file that. Okay? It's not a lien. It's not a cloud on the title. Now, this is what we were talking about way back earlier in the video. If you see required bond, in order to protect against liens, highlight that. The owner can require a bond. The older books, like I said, in the front under bonds, they don't have lien bonds. Some of the newer books do. This is the lien bond for the older books, but it's also in the newer book. The owner can require a bond that would be a lien bond that would stand. If you filed a lien, the lien bond would pay you. Okay? Now, after going to court and going through a bunch of rigmarole, because the last thing an insurance company wants to do is pay you. All right, priority. I want you to highlight that. This is who gets paid first when liens are filed on the job. You'll notice Uncle Sam gets his first. And then we go down the list, but have this list highlighted so you'll be able to pick out who gets paid first if taxes isn't a choice. We just talked about this. Highlight your notice of termination. That's going to be filed when I complete the job. That basically cancels out your notice of contract that I filed, because it says I'm finished with the contract. Now, this is what we get into. We need to know these times. This is basically for you, the subcontractor, between the general contractor and the subcontractor. You have 30 days after you filed your notice of termination, which, remember, you were supposed to file your notice of termination when you finished the job. So you have 30 days to file your lien. Highlight this. The general contractor, this would be the contract between him and the owner. You're not included in this. The general contractor has 60 days to file his lien. You have 30 as a subcontractor. The general contractor has 60. And then read down below that, you'll see what I just talked about. A lawsuit to foreclose on the lien must be filed within 1 year. Okay, highlight that. This has come up before. The last paragraph on my page, it says Residential Truth in Construction Act. This has come up as a question before in the past. Before you do a home improvement, this is not with a general contractor on a commercial job. This is if you're doing a home improvement, you're working on somebody's house. You're supposed to give them a notice of lien rights. It's a piece of paper that says, look, I can file a lien against your house. And I think they have a sample of it in here. But you're supposed to present that to them, have them sign it, saying that they understand that you can file a lien against their house. Just remember that. Notice of lien rights, if you're doing work on a residential property, that goes to the homeowner. And if you look, next page, it does in my book has a notice of lien rights. If you really want to be safe and you're going to do remodeling on somebody's house, take a copy of this. Say, I'm required by law to have you read this and sign it and date it, and then you keep that. That way you're clear. If you do have to file a lien, if they don't pay you, whatever. Anyway, make sure that you highlight that. And then if you look at this last page in this chapter, it says final inspection. This kind of goes definition of the lien, who can file it, the time to file it, which tells you go back, you got to read the 30 and 60 days. But you have to file to foreclose within 1 year. Now, in my book, chapter 17 is math for plumbing and pipe fitting. It may be 16 in y'all's book, it may be 15 in your book, whatever. Chapter 17 is a very, very important chapter, not necessarily for the business and law, but for part 2 and a little bit of part 1 during our exam. This will be a very, very good chapter for you to put a tab in, because during the seminar we'll go through and we're going to use some things out of part 2. But this is all the formulas I need and everything else. It's a very, very important chapter to know how to get to in a hurry. If I'm on the test, I'm in part 2, and you somehow or another forget what we taught or went over with during the seminar, and you didn't bother to call me that night and say, hey Ron, I forgot this formula, how do I do this? This is a very good chapter to know and have. Now basically the rest of the book is excerpts from Louisiana Revised Statutes, which is the actual law in Louisiana, which states all the little things in specifics according to the Louisiana Revised Statutes. I'll give you a couple of things during the seminar that will highlight that come up in the code book, and we could also go back and highlight in this, but we're not necessarily going to bother with it on this video. I try to keep this as short as possible because I know you're going to lose interest in it. It's very boring. I agree with you. But all we have to do is make sure we watch it enough to know where to go in our books to pass the test. Once you pass the test, you never have to log in here and look at me again. Okay? Now, that being said, make sure that I see you all at the seminar, because this is just one part, small piece of it, a very small piece. This part of the exam is relatively easy to pass if you'll do what I ask you to do. Highlight your book, go back through here, read those highlighted sections. Don't try to memorize them, but get familiar where they are. And I'll see you guys at the seminar. When you come in, get ready to study. Also, I don't know if I said this earlier, I may have, you know, my mind wanders. I get a little off track sometimes. But anyway, I'm going to have a short practice test, then we're going to time it just like we were in the exam for this business and law part. So we're going to pretend like that we're in taking our business law, kind of give you a little feel of what the business law section is going to be like. But this is not necessarily the section we need to be most worried about. The most worried about section is the dreaded part 2. And I'm sure you've heard stories about it. It's a bad, bad, tough boy. But we're going to whip it during the seminar. So I will see you guys then. Make sure you study. Watch the video again if you need to. Stop, pause, get your book highlighted, and get ready. Now I'm going to see if I can work this equipment